It was supposed to be just another quiet evening at one of the city's most elegant restaurants, the kind of place where every detail feels carefully crafted, from the warm glow of the chandeliers to the gentle sound of the piano playing in the background. The tables were filled with people lost in laughter, clinking glasses, and enjoying the perfect escape from the rush of their daily lives. But little did anyone know that behind the polished smiles and polished silverware, something shocking was about to unfold. Something that would leave everyone in the room talking long after the night was over. At the center of it all was a billionaire known not only for his wealth but for his reputation of being humble and down-to-earth. Someone who never liked to flaunt his power or make others feel small. To most people, he was admired for the way he carried himself with quiet dignity, never letting success change the core of who he was. That evening, he had simply come to enjoy dinner in peace, seated across from his girlfriend, who was known for her beauty and charm. To the outside world, they seemed like a perfect pair, the kind of couple who turned heads the moment they walked into a room. But behind the surface, cracks were beginning to show. Cracks that would come to light in the most unexpected way. It all started when the waitress, a young woman working late into the night to support her family, approached their table with a warm smile. She had been polite and careful, treating the couple like she treated everyone else, with respect and sincerity. But for some reason, her presence seemed to irritate the billionaire's girlfriend. Instead of appreciating the effort, she began to make cutting remarks under her breath, little jabs that only grew sharper with time. At first, the billionaire stayed quiet, unsure if he should step in, but he kept watching closely, his calm eyes never missing a single detail. What happened next shocked even him. With a voice loud enough for others to hear, the girlfriend suddenly turned her attention on the waitress and, without any reason, began to belittle her. She accused her of things she hadn't done, raised her voice, and created a scene where none was needed. The waitress tried to hold herself together, her hands trembling as she explained she had done nothing wrong. But before anyone could fully understand what was happening, the girlfriend took it a step further. She threatened to have the young woman fired right there, simply because she thought it would be fun. The restaurant grew tense. Guests turned their heads, whispers spread across the tables, and the soft music seemed to fade under the weight of the moment. The billionaire sat silently for a moment longer, his expression unreadable, his mind racing with thoughts. Was this really the person he had chosen to stand by his side? Was this how she treated people when she thought no one important was watching? And then, just as the silence became unbearable, the billionaire slowly pushed back his chair. Every eye in the room shifted to him, waiting to see what he would do next. No one could have imagined the decision he was about to make, one that would not only change the life of the waitress but would also expose the true character of the woman sitting across from him. The question was simple, but the answer carried weight. Would he stay silent and let the cruelty pass, or would he stand up for what was right, no matter the cost? What happened in that moment stunned everyone in the room. And it's a story you won't forget. The room seemed to hold its breath as the billionaire stood, his tall frame casting a shadow over the table. His girlfriend looked up at him, half confused and half amused, as though she believed he might join in on her cruel game. But the stillness in his eyes was different, heavy with a kind of quiet judgment she had never seen before. He didn't speak right away, and that silence made the moment even more unbearable for everyone watching. The waitress, still holding the small notepad in her hand, tried to blink away the tears threatening to fall, embarrassed that her hard work had turned into a public scene. This wasn't the first time the billionaire had seen this side of his girlfriend, though never so openly. In private, she had often made subtle comments about people she thought were beneath her. Small digs at waiters, cashiers, even drivers. He had brushed them off before, thinking they were fleeting moods or careless words. But now, watching her so boldly humiliate someone who had done nothing wrong, he realized it was more than a passing flaw. It was a glimpse into who she truly was when she thought no one of value was paying attention. The billionaire had built his entire empire on principles of respect and humility. Long before the world knew his name, he had been a boy working odd jobs just to keep his family afloat. He remembered the sting of being spoken down to, the long hours where his efforts were overlooked, The quiet moments when kindness from a stranger meant the world. Those memories shaped him into the man he became, a man who swore he would never forget what it felt like to stand on the other side of power. Now, standing in that restaurant, he couldn't ignore the parallels. The waitress could have been him years ago, struggling, holding on, praying for just a little bit of kindness. His girlfriend, however, seemed blind to all of this. She leaned back in her chair with a smug smile, sipping her glass of wine as though the drama were nothing more than entertainment. She didn't notice the growing disapproval in the eyes of the guests around her. She didn't hear the whispers about cruelty and arrogance. All she saw was herself center stage, with the power to make someone else feel small. The waitress finally whispered an apology she didn't owe, her voice shaking, trying desperately to hold on to her job. Her hands clutched the tray close to her chest as though it could shield her from the humiliation. But the billionaire's gaze never left her. He saw her trembling, saw the strength it took for her to stand there in silence, and something inside him stirred. The pianist faltered on a note, the clinking of silverware had stopped, and the entire restaurant waited for him to act. For the billionaire, the decision was no longer just about one woman's mistreatment of an employee. It was about the kind of man he was willing to be in that moment. Would he allow money and appearances to dictate his silence, or would he hold true to the values that built everything he had? The tension grew unbearable as he turned his head back toward his girlfriend. Her smile wavered slightly, noticing the way his expression had shifted. She had never seen him look at her this way before. It wasn't anger but disappointment. A kind of disappointment that carried more weight than any argument or raised voice ever could. Around them no one spoke, but every eye was fixed on the scene. The billionaire's next words and actions would not only decide the fate of the young waitress, but would also reveal something deeper about the very foundation of his relationship. The air seemed heavier, the suspense sharper, as everyone waited to see what this powerful man, with all his wealth and influence, would choose to do. The billionaire's silence stretched on, long enough that people began exchanging nervous glances. The waitress shifted uneasily, her eyes darting toward the exit as if she might flee the scene altogether. She didn't want to be the center of attention. She just wanted to do her job, collect her tips, and get home to her small apartment where her mother and younger brother were waiting for her. Tonight was supposed to be one of her busiest shifts, the kind that helped her cover rent. Instead, it had become a moment that could cost her everything. She remembered the warning from her manager earlier that week. Don't upset the high-end clients. They're the ones who keep this place running. Those words echoed in her mind now as she fought back tears. The billionaire's girlfriend wasn't just another customer. She had influence, and people listened to her. If she wanted the waitress gone, she had the power to make that happen. It wasn't fair, but fairness rarely had a place in situations like this. Across the room, a couple seated at a nearby table whispered to each other. They had watched the scene unfold from the very beginning, and though they didn't know the billionaire personally, they recognized him instantly. Everyone in the city did. They were waiting, like everyone else, to see if his reputation for kindness would hold true when it mattered most. For years, the media had painted him as someone different from the usual powerful men, grounded, thoughtful, and compassionate. But now, under the glare of the chandeliers and the weight of public expectation, his values were being tested in real time. The girlfriend, still lounging in her chair, took his silence as an opening. "You see," she said lightly, loud enough for others to hear, "this is why standards matter. Some people just aren't cut out for places like this. They ruin the experience for the rest of us." Her voice dripped with condescension, as if the waitress's presence was nothing more than a blemish on her perfect evening. She didn't notice the tightening jaw of her boyfriend, nor the way the room's atmosphere had shifted against her. Inside the billionaire's mind, memories stirred like ghosts. He thought back to the night he worked as a dishwasher at a crowded diner, the sting of bleach on his hands, the exhaustion that made his legs ache. He thought of the one time a wealthy customer had mocked him for dropping a plate, laughing as though his mistake defined him. He had carried that humiliation for years. Now, standing in this restaurant decades later, He felt the same injustice unfolding in front of him, but this time he wasn't the powerless one. Meanwhile, the waitress's manager hovered at the edge of the room, torn between two choices. He could side with the billionaire's girlfriend to avoid risking the restaurant's reputation with an influential customer, or he could protect his employee. But his own job was on the line too, and the wrong choice could ruin him. His indecision added another layer to the growing conflict, a reminder of how power and fear could twist even simple acts of fairness. The billionaire's phone buzzed quietly in his pocket, pulling his attention for just a second. A message flashed from his assistant, a reminder about tomorrow's charity gala where he was set to donate millions to causes supporting single mothers and struggling families. The irony struck him hard. Here he was, ready to make headlines for generosity, yet unable to ignore the hypocrisy of staying quiet in this moment. Every second of his hesitation deepened the tension. His girlfriend's arrogance, the waitress's trembling silence, the guest's judgment, the manager's fear. All of it collided into a storm that demanded action. And though he knew his response could change everything, his relationship, his public image, and even the waitress's livelihood, he still hadn't moved. The piano resumed softly in the background, but the notes felt hollow against the unease in the room. The question hanging over everyone remained the same. When the moment called for it, would the billionaire truly live up to the man people believed him to be? And if he did, what would it cost? The billionaire's chair still stood slightly pushed back from the table, a symbol of a decision he had not yet spoken into existence. Every eye in the restaurant was on him, and even the soft clatter from the kitchen seemed to have gone silent. The waitress, still holding her tray close, felt her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to disappear, but at the same time, she couldn't look away from the man who held her fate in his hands. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and hope. Was he going to side with his girlfriend, or was he about to do something no one expected? His girlfriend broke the silence again, this time sharper, her voice cutting through the tension. "Why are you just standing there?" she demanded, her tone growing impatient. "Tell her to leave. People like this ruin fine dining. I don't want her near me again." She spoke as if her words were law, expecting immediate obedience. She didn't see the way the room flinched at her cruelty, the way people's eyes darted from her to the billionaire, waiting for his reaction. The billionaire's hand rested on the back of his chair, his knuckles tightening. The weight of the moment pressed on him like never before. It wasn't just about the waitress anymore. It was about truth. About seeing someone he thought he knew expose a side of themselves he had ignored for too long. Every second that passed felt like a thread pulling tighter, ready to snap. The waitress lowered her head, a single tear sliding down her cheek before she could hide it. She thought about her younger brother at home who had been sick all week, the medicine she had bought with tips, and her mother who worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. She thought about how easily everything could be taken away because of one person's cruelty. Her chest ached with the weight of it, but she stood there, too proud to beg any further. Guests whispered in hushed tones. A man in a gray suit shook his head, muttering something about arrogance. A woman clutched her pearls and leaned closer to her husband, eyes wide as though she were witnessing a scene from a play rather than real life. The tension was thick, spreading through every corner of the restaurant, until even the air felt charged with expectation. The billionaire's mind replayed every sign he had overlooked in his girlfriend, the dismissive tone she used with service staff, the way she often measured people's worth by the clothes they wore or the cars they drove. It all rushed back in stark clarity. For the first time, he wasn't just embarrassed by her behavior. He was unsettled by it. The kind of unsettled that demanded change, no matter the cost. His girlfriend leaned closer. Her voice a whisper meant only for him but loud enough that the nearest tables could still hear. "If you want me by your side, you'll back me on this. Otherwise, you'll regret it." Her words were smooth, confident, as though she believed her beauty and status gave her power over him. But her threat only deepened the quiet storm building in his chest. The waitress finally exhaled, her breath shaky, as though she had been holding it the entire time. She whispered, "Please, sir. I didn't do anything wrong. Her voice cracked under the weight of desperation, yet her eyes held a flicker of strength, a final plea for someone to see her humanity. The billionaire's chair scraped against the polished floor as he stepped forward. The sound echoed like a signal, sending ripples of anticipation through the room. The pianist stopped mid-song, the servers froze in place, and even the manager straightened, unsure of what was about to unfold. Every thread of tension in the room had pulled tight, every heart beat a little faster. And in that moment, everyone knew the next words out of the billionaire's mouth would shatter the stillness like glass. What he was about to say, or do, would decide more than just the waitress's future. It would expose the truth of who he really was and reveal what mattered most to him when the mask of wealth and power was stripped away. The billionaire's voice was just about to break the silence when an unexpected interruption shifted the entire room. The restaurant doors opened, and a man in a sharp black suit stepped inside, his presence instantly commanding attention. He wasn't a guest, and he wasn't staff. The billionaire recognized him immediately. His personal advisor, someone who rarely appeared in public without a reason. The advisor's expression was grave, and his sudden arrival added another layer of tension to an already fragile moment. The girlfriend frowned, annoyed that her performance had been interrupted. She leaned back with irritation, as though the man's entrance had stolen the spotlight from her. But the billionaire knew that if his advisor had come here, it was urgent. The timing, however, couldn't have been worse. The advisor moved quickly toward their table, his voice low but firm. "Sir, we need to speak privately. It's important." His eyes flicked briefly toward the girlfriend, then to the trembling waitress, before settling back on the billionaire. That glance wasn't lost on anyone watching. Guests began whispering again, sensing that something larger was unfolding, something beyond the public humiliation of a young waitress. The billionaire stayed silent, his mind caught between two storms. On one hand was the immediate cruelty unfolding in front of him. On the other, something his advisor clearly believed couldn't wait. The tension doubled, pressing down on him, as though fate itself had chosen this exact night to test him. The girlfriend crossed her arms, her tone sharp. "Really? Now, can't you see we're in the middle of something?" Her words only deepened the unease in the room. She didn't realize the advisor's interruption was more than an inconvenience. It was the spark of something bigger. The waitress stood frozen, unsure whether this sudden shift meant her situation would worsen or improve. She caught a brief look of sympathy in the advisor's eyes, a silent acknowledgement of her pain, before his attention returned to his employer. For the first time, she felt there might be someone else in the room who understood. The billionaire clenched his jaw, weighing his options. The advisor leaned in closer, whispering words only he could hear. "This concerns your reputation, sir. If it isn't handled tonight, the damage will be permanent." The billionaire's heart sank. Whatever the issue was, it tied directly into the image he had spent years building, a reputation of fairness, humility, and integrity. The girlfriend, sensing she was losing control of the moment, slammed her glass on the table. The sound rang out like a challenge. "I don't care what this is about," she snapped. "If you don't deal with her right now, everyone will see you for what you are, weak." Her eyes narrowed, daring him to choose between her and the principles he had always lived by. The guests held their breath, realizing they were witnessing more than a simple argument. They were seeing the unraveling of power, pride, and hidden truths all colliding at once. The billionaire's decision now carried even more weight than before. Not only was a young woman's job hanging in the balance, but his reputation and his relationship were both on the verge of shattering. And the unexpected arrival of his advisor hinted that something even more dangerous lurked beneath the surface, waiting to explode. The stakes had risen. The room was silent once more, but the silence was no longer just about a cruel demand at a dinner table. It was about the future of a man who had everything, and how quickly it all could fall apart. The billionaire straightened his back, his expression sharper than anyone had ever seen. The tension had reached its breaking point, and the weight of every eye in the restaurant pressed down on him. He looked first at the trembling waitress, then at his advisor, and finally at the woman sitting across from him, the girlfriend who had once charmed him but now revealed a side he could no longer ignore. His voice cut through the silence, calm but firm. "She's not the problem here," he said, motioning toward the waitress. "The problem is the way you've treated her, as if she's less than you. That ends tonight." The room erupted in a wave of whispers, guests leaning forward in their chairs, stunned that he had dared to confront his girlfriend so openly. The waitress blinked, unable to hide the tears rolling down her cheeks, this time from relief, not fear. The girlfriend's smile faltered. "You can't be serious," she hissed, her face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're humiliating me for her?" She gestured toward the waitress as if she were nothing more than a disposable figure. But the billionaire didn't flinch. "You humiliated yourself," he replied coldly. His words carried a finality that shook her more than shouting ever could. She opened her mouth to argue, but the steel in his eyes told her it was over. She grabbed her purse, her pride stung, and stormed out of the restaurant, her heels striking the floor like thunderclaps. The guests exhaled all at once, the tension loosening. But before the relief could settle, the advisor stepped closer and revealed the second blow. "Sir," he said gravely, his voice low but audible to those nearby, "someone has already leaked what happened tonight. There are photos, recordings. By tomorrow, this will be everywhere." The billionaire froze. He had expected the scene to make an impression in the room, but he hadn't considered the world outside. Social media was unforgiving, and his entire reputation, built carefully over years of generosity and respect, was now at the mercy of a single evening's events. The waitress gasped quietly, horrified that her humiliation might now be broadcast to strangers across the globe. But instead of panicking, the billionaire did something no one anticipated. He walked over to the waitress, still shaking with uncertainty, and spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "If the world wants a story," he said, "let it be the truth. Tonight isn't about scandal. It's about a woman who came to work with dignity and was treated unfairly. And it's about what happens when we choose to stand up for people instead of tearing them down." The room erupted into applause, not staged but genuine, as the billionaire's words turned a private conflict into a public statement of values. The waitress covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed, realizing she hadn't just kept her job. Her story had become a symbol of something bigger. But just as the applause filled the air, the advisor leaned in one last time, his voice urgent. "There's more. The leak didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone close, someone who wanted this to destroy you." The billionaire's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. The girlfriend was gone, the waitress was safe, but a deeper betrayal had just been revealed. And though the conflict in the restaurant had ended, a new mystery had only begun. The applause slowly faded, but the billionaire stood firm, his words still echoing through the restaurant. The revelation from his advisor lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Someone close to him had orchestrated the leak, someone who wanted to see him fall. He thought of his girlfriend, her smugness, the way she had spoken with such confidence as though she held all the power. It wasn't difficult to piece together. She had staged the entire scene, not only to humiliate the waitress but to test him, to corner him in public where his every move could be magnified. Instead of anger, the billionaire felt a wave of clarity. This wasn't just about one evening. It was about the values he wanted his life to stand for. Wealth and reputation meant nothing if they weren't anchored in truth and kindness. He turned back to the waitress, whose eyes were still wide with disbelief, and gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No one is losing their job tonight," he said with conviction. "In fact, if you're willing, I'd like to support your dreams beyond this place. No one who works this hard should ever feel powerless." Her lips trembled as she tried to find words, but nothing came. All she could manage was a whispered thank you, knowing her life had just shifted in ways she never imagined. Guests nodded approvingly, their earlier unease replaced with admiration. What had begun as an ugly display of arrogance had transformed into a lesson on integrity, one that every person present would carry with them long after leaving the restaurant. The billionaire's advisor leaned closer, adding quietly, "We'll handle the press. By morning, the story will not be about scandal. It will be about how you stood up for her." The billionaire nodded, relieved but aware that the work was far from over. There would be headlines, opinions, speculation. Yet, he also knew the truth had a way of cutting through noise when it came from the heart. Outside, the night carried on as if nothing had happened. Cars rolled past, streetlights glowed, and the city breathed with its usual rhythm. But inside that restaurant, everyone felt they had witnessed something rare, an act of courage in the face of cruelty. The billionaire didn't seek praise for it. He only wanted the waitress to know she mattered, that her voice was not invisible. As the evening drew to a close, the billionaire walked out with his advisor, leaving the diners to murmur about what they had just seen. The waitress stayed behind, her co-workers surrounding her with quiet comfort, reminding her that she was not alone anymore. She knew her life would never be the same. For the billionaire, the night marked the end of one relationship but the beginning of something greater, an unshakable reminder that real power isn't measured by wealth or status but by the courage to stand for what's right, even when it costs you. The betrayal he had uncovered still lingered, but it no longer defined the night. Instead, the story that spread across the city and later across the world was of a man who chose respect over pride, and of a waitress who discovered that even in the darkest moments, dignity could still shine through. In the end, the lesson was simple yet unforgettable. How we treat others, especially when no one is watching, is the truest reflection of who we are. And sometimes it takes a single moment, a single act of compassion, to remind everyone what really matters.